Alone in the desert, a baby camel named Khalil collapsed, desperate for survival. With the sun scorching down and the winds raging, hope seemed to vanish into the vast sands. Just when all appeared lost, a wild stallion named Rami charged toward him, driven by an instinct to save. This is a gripping tale of resilience and friendship, where the bond between two unlikely allies could mean the difference between life and death. Get ready to witness a journey that will tug at your heartstrings and inspire your spirit. In the heart of the vast desert, where the sun blazed like a relentless fire, baby camel Khalil wandered aimlessly. His small hooves sank into the burning sand with each step, his innocent eyes scanning the endless horizon for any sign of his lost herd. The desert stretched before him like an ocean of gold, beautiful yet terrifying in its emptiness. Only hours ago, he had been nestled safely against his mother's warm side. But a moment of distraction during their migration had separated him from the only family he had ever known. But the sky suddenly darkened, transforming from brilliant blue to an ominous gray. The wind picked up, swirling around Khalil like 1,000 angry spirits. Sand began to sting his eyes as the approaching storm gathered strength. His heart pounded wildly as he realized he was completely alone, with nowhere to hide from nature's fury. The desert, once still and silent, now roared to life with malevolent intent. Khalil had heard stories from the elder camels about the deadly sandstorms that could swallow entire caravans, burying them beneath mountains of shifting sand. Now he faced one alone, without the wisdom or strength of his elders to guide him. As the storm unleashed its full power, Khalil stumbled blindly through the chaos. The deafening roar of wind drowned out his desperate cries for help. With each gust stronger than the last, his small body fought to stay upright until his trembling legs could no longer support him. The air grew thick with sand, making each breath a struggle. His lungs burned, and his throat felt raw as he gasped for air. The world around him disappeared into a swirling vortex of tan and brown, disorienting him completely. The temperature dropped rapidly as the sun's warmth was blocked by the massive cloud of sand overhead. Khalil's thin coat, designed for the daytime heat rather than sudden cold, provided little protection against the biting chill that now enveloped him. With a final, heartbreaking cry, he collapsed onto the merciless desert floor. His small body trembled with exhaustion and fear as the storm raged on around him. He curled into himself, trying to create a barrier against the relentless assault of wind and sand. In his young mind, memories of his mother's gentle nuzzles and the comforting sounds of his herd became increasingly distant, replaced by the howling wind and his own frightened heartbeat. The desert, which had been his home since birth, now seemed determined to claim him as another of its countless victims. But this was just the beginning of his nightmare. As darkness fell and the temperature plummeted further, new dangers would emerge from the shadows. Predators with keen senses and hungry bellies would soon begin their nightly hunt, and a lone baby camel would make an easy target. Khalil's survival would depend not just on weathering the storm, but on what or who might find him once it passed. The storm continued its rampage through the night, nature's fury unrelenting against the small figure buried beneath the growing mounds of sand. By dawn, only Khalil's head and the curve of his back remained visible above the desert's new landscape. The first rays of sunlight broke through the settling dust, casting an ethereal glow across the transformed terrain. The storm had passed, but it left behind a deadly silence. Where once there had been gentle dunes and familiar rock formations, now stood an alien topography, reshaped by the wind's violent hand. Even the most experienced desert travelers would find themselves disoriented in this new landscape. Khalil's eyes fluttered open, crusted with sand and weak from dehydration. His body felt impossibly heavy, pinned beneath the weight of accumulated sand. He attempted a feeble cry, but his parched throat produced only a raspy whisper that disappeared instantly into the vast emptiness. The young camel's survival instinct urged him to move, to free himself, but his strength had abandoned him hours ago. His thoughts drifted to his mother, her warm, comforting scent, the protective way she would position herself between him and any perceived danger. Would he ever feel that security again? Or was this barren, unforgiving place to be his final resting ground? Miles away, at the edge of a small oasis, a magnificent wild stallion raised his head from the crystal waters. Rami, as the Bedouins called him, was a legend among the desert dwellers. A horse who had escaped captivity years ago and now roamed free, answering to no master. His coat gleamed like polished copper in the morning light, his powerful muscles rippling beneath as he shook droplets of water from his mane. Something unusual carried on the wind, a scent that didn't belong, a disruption in the desert's familiar rhythm. The stallion's history was written in the scars that marked his otherwise flawless hide, evidence of the cruelty he had endured before gaining his freedom. Perhaps it was this past suffering that made him uniquely attuned to the distress of others. Rami's nostrils flared as he tested the air again. His ears swiveled forward, alert to a distant sound imperceptible to lesser creatures. Without hesitation, the stallion bolted from the sanctuary of the oasis, hooves thundering across the packed sand with purposeful determination. Something was calling him, pulling him toward the heart of the storm's path. The desert blurred around him as he ran, his powerful legs eating up the distance. With effortless grace, other animals scattered at his approach, desert foxes ducking into their burrows, lizards scurrying beneath rocks, all instinctively making way for the majestic creature on his mysterious mission. As the sun climbed higher, Khalil's hope diminished with each labored breath. The desert heat returned with merciless intensity, baking the sand that imprisoned him. His eyelids grew heavier, the temptation to surrender to permanent sleep becoming increasingly irresistible. In his delirium, he imagined the ground trembling beneath him, perhaps the approach of his mother and the herd returning to find him. Memories flooded his fading consciousness. The taste of his mother's milk, the playful nudges of other calves, the comforting sounds of the herd settling down for the night. These precious recollections seemed to be slipping away, like water through the desert sand, leaving behind only the hollow ache of loss. But the rhythmic vibrations were real. The thundering of hooves grew louder, closer, until suddenly they stopped. Through sand-crusted lashes, Khalil perceived a towering silhouette blocking the sun, a creature unlike any he had seen before. The stallion stood majestically over the trapped camel, intelligent eyes assessing the dire situation. Steam rose from Rami's heaving flanks, evidence of his relentless journey across the scorching desert. He had run without pause, driven by an instinct he couldn't explain but wouldn't ignore. Rami circled the half-buried camel, snorting and pawing at the ground. With unexpected gentleness, he began to dig at the sand with his hooves, carefully working around Khalil's small body. Hours passed as the horse methodically freed the young camel, occasionally stopping to nudge him with his muzzle, as if encouraging him to hold on. The sun arced overhead, beating down upon them both. But Rami persisted. His normally wild, untamed spirit focused entirely on this singular task, saving a creature who should, by all natural laws, mean nothing to him. Yet something in the vulnerable camel's plight had awakened a profound sense of responsibility in the stallion's heart. By midday, Khalil lay fully exposed on the sand, too weak to stand but free from his sandy prison. Rami dropped to his knees beside the baby camel in an extraordinary display of compassion. He nuzzled Khalil's side, urging him to rise. When the camel failed to respond, the stallion did something remarkable. He positioned himself to allow his shadow to fall across Khalil's body, providing relief from the scorching sun. The horse remained motionless in this uncomfortable position, sacrificing his own comfort for the sake of the struggling young camel. Occasionally, he would gently lick the sand from Khalil's eyes and nostrils, clearing his airways and offering what little moisture his tongue could provide. As afternoon approached, Rami grew restless. Water was needed soon, or the young camel would not survive another night. The oasis was distant, but it represented their only hope. With gentle persistence, he nudged and pushed until Khalil, drawing on reserves of strength he didn't know he possessed, wobbled precariously to his feet. The stallion positioned himself alongside the unsteady camel, offering his body as support. Khalil's legs trembled violently with the effort of standing, his knobby knees threatening to buckle with each tentative step. But Rami was patient, adjusting his pace to match the camel's laborious movement, never rushing, never abandoning his newfound charge. Together, the unlikely pair began their slow journey across the desert. A magnificent wild horse and a baby camel bound by circumstance and something more profound than either could understand. The contrast between them was striking. Rami, the embodiment of power and freedom, and Khalil, fragile and dependent. Yet, in this moment, they were equals. Two souls navigating the perilous desert in perfect harmony. When Khalil stumbled, Rami was there to steady him. When the young camel's strength faltered, the stallion would stop, allowing him to rest before urging him onward with gentle nudges. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of amber and gold. Shadows lengthened across the sand as dusk approached, bringing with it the promise of cooler temperatures, but also the threat of nocturnal predators. Rami's senses remained vigilant, his ears constantly swiveling to catch any sound that might signal danger. His nostrils tested the air for the scent of jackals or desert wolves that would view the weakened camel as easy prey. Survival would depend on reaching water before nightfall. But they were no longer alone in their struggle. An improbable friendship had been forged in the crucible of the desert's harshest test. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Rami guided Khalil over the crest of a dune, revealing the welcome sight of the oasis below, a haven of palm trees and life-giving water. The journey had been arduous, but together they had defied the desert's attempt to claim another victim. What awaited them beyond this night remained uncertain. But in finding each other, both horse and camel had discovered something rare and precious, a companion to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Darkness had nearly consumed the desert landscape by the time Rami and Khalil descended the final dune toward the oasis. The first stars punctured the indigo canopy overhead, their ancient light offering silent witness to the extraordinary journey below. Khalil's steps had grown increasingly uncertain, each movement a battle against his failing body. Only Rami's steadfast presence kept the young camel moving forward, one painful step after another. The desert wind had died down to a gentle whisper, as if the very elements were holding their breath, watching this improbable pair struggle toward salvation. The oasis emerged from the shadows, like a mirage made manifest, a pocket of lush abundance in defiance of the barren world surrounding it. Tall date palms swayed gently in the evening breeze, their fronds whispering secrets of survival against impossible odds. The scent of water, clean, life-giving water, reached Khalil's nostrils, triggering a primal response that momentarily overcame his exhaustion. Ancient Bedouin legends spoke of oases as the tears of angels, fallen to earth to sustain life in the harshest of realms. In this moment, such fanciful tales seemed entirely plausible to the desperate young camel. With renewed determination, the young camel stumbled the final distance to the water's edge. The pool reflected the emerging stars, a mirror of the heavens nestled in the desert floor. Khalil collapsed at the shoreline, his parched muzzle breaking the perfect reflection as he drank desperately. Each swallow brought renewed strength, the cool liquid soothing his raw throat and revitalizing his depleted system. Rami stood guard nearby, his keen eyes scanning the perimeter for threats that might lurk in the gathering darkness. The stallion's ears flicked back and forth, cataloging every rustle and whisper of the oasis. His nostrils periodically flared, drawing in the complex tapestry of scents, the sweet perfume of night-blooming flowers, the earthy richness of damp soil. And beneath it all, the subtle markers of other creatures who called this sanctuary home. After Khalil had drunk his fill, he remained sprawled by the water's edge, too exhausted to move further. His sides heaved with the effort of his journey, his thin frame bearing the evidence of his ordeal in dusty patches and minor abrasions. Rami gently nudged him toward a small clearing beneath the protective canopy of palms. The ground here was soft, with fallen fronds and scattered vegetation, a natural bedding far more forgiving than the exposed sand. The stallion circled the clearing several times, his hooves tamping down the area in an instinctive preparation of their resting place for the night. With each circuit, he pushed aside sharp twigs and stones, creating a smoother surface for the exhausted camel to rest upon. This behavior, so deliberate and thoughtful, seemed at odds with his wild nature, yet flowed from him with natural grace. As Khalil settled into the makeshift nest, Rami positioned himself protectively alongside the young camel. The horse's larger body provided warmth against the desert night's chill, while his alert presence promised safety. The contrast between them was striking. The stallion's sleek, muscular form next to the gangly, still developing frame of the camel. Yet there was a symmetry in their companionship that transcended their physical differences. For the first time since losing his herd, Khalil felt the tension gradually release from his small frame. His eyelids grew heavy, not with the dangerous heaviness of dehydration, but with the natural weight of earned sleep. The oasis itself seemed to embrace the unlikely pair, its nocturnal symphony of rustling palms and chirping insects creating a lullaby of survival. Tiny tree frogs added their melodic calls from hidden perches among the vegetation. A distant owl announced its presence with a haunting hoot that echoed across the water. Even the insects contributed to the nighttime chorus, crickets with their rhythmic chirping and the occasional buzz of a beetle taking flight. Moonlight filtered through the palm fronds, casting dappled patterns across their resting forms, one large and powerful, one small and vulnerable, yet somehow perfectly matched in this moment of shared respite. Throughout the night, Rami remained semi-alert, never falling into the deep sleep that Khalil enjoyed. The stallion's rest came in brief intervals, his consciousness rising periodically to assess their surroundings before allowing himself to drift off again. Once, near midnight, his head jerked up at the sound of approaching paws, a desert fox venturing too close for comfort. A single warning snort from the horse sent the curious predator scampering away into the darkness. Khalil slumbered on, oblivious to the brief encounter, his body focused entirely on the essential work of recovery. Dawn arrived with the gentle persistence of a new beginning, the eastern sky gradually transforming from black to deep purple, then to a palette of pinks and oranges that heralded the sun's approach. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the unique scent of morning in the desert. a brief window of freshness before the day's heat would assert itself. Khalil awoke to find Rami already standing, the stallion's coat gleaming copper and gold in the early light. Dew had settled on both their bodies during the night, tiny droplets that captured the dawn's colors like miniature prisms. The young camel rose on steadier legs, his body somewhat recovered after a night of rest and hydration. His movements, while still cautious, had regained a measure of the natural grace inherent to his species. The oasis revealed itself fully in the daylight. A verdant haven larger than it had appeared in the previous night's darkness. The water at its center was not a simple pool, but a small lake fed by an underground spring, its surface now perfectly still in the windless morning. Surrounding the water was a graduated series of micro-environments. From the lush, almost tropical vegetation at the water's edge to the more sparse, desert-adapted plants at the perimeter. Date palms dominated the landscape, their fruit-heavy fronds reaching skyward like nature's own monuments. Between them grew smaller shrubs and hardy grasses, creating a complex ecosystem that defied the surrounding desolation. To Khalil's surprise, they were not alone. The oasis hosted a diverse community of desert dwellers who maintained a respectful distance from the newcomers. Gazelles with delicate limbs and watchful eyes grazed at the opposite shore, their movements precise and elegant as they selected choice vegetation. Desert foxes slipped like shadows between the palms, their rust-colored coats blending with the landscape. Curious eyes occasionally visible as they assessed the newcomers from safe distances. Birds of countless varieties flitted between branches, their songs creating a cheerful counterpoint to the stillness of the desert beyond. Brilliantly colored sunbirds darted from flower to flower, their iridescent plumage catching the light like living jewels. Larger predatory birds circled high overhead, their keen eyes surveying the activity below with patient interest. Most surprising of all was the presence of other camels. Not a full herd, but a small group of 3 adults who regarded Khalil with cautious interest. They were different from his herd, lighter in color, with slightly different proportions, but unmistakably kin in a broader sense. Their coats were the pale tan of sun-bleached sand, rather than the deeper brown Khalil was accustomed to seeing among his own kind. They stood with the quiet dignity of survivors, their bodies bearing the subtle marks of lives lived in harmony with the harsh desert environment. They maintained their distance, communicating in low grunts among themselves as they observed the young camel and his unusual companion. Their conversation, incomprehensible to human ears, contained notes of surprise, concern, and intense curiosity about the strange partnership they were witnessing. Rami seemed unconcerned by the other inhabitants, focusing instead on Khalil's recovery. The stallion guided the young camel to a patch of vegetation growing near the water's edge. Tender shoots and leaves that offered nourishment beyond the life-giving water. He used his muzzle to indicate the most nutritious options, seeming to understand instinctively what the young camel needed most. Khalil ate gratefully, his body instinctively seeking to replenish what had been lost during his ordeal. The fresh vegetation was a welcome change from the dry, sparse fare that had been his diet with the herd. Here, the plants were succulent and varied, offering a richness of nutrients that quickly began to restore his depleted reserves. As the sun climbed higher, casting its golden light across the oasis, more of the sanctuary's residents emerged to begin their daily routines. Tiny jerboas, mouse-like creatures with elongated hind legs, darted between patches of cover, gathering seeds that had fallen during the night. A monitor lizard emerged from its burrow to bask on a sun-warmed rock, its scaled body absorbing the heat it would need for the day's activities. Butterflies appeared as if by magic, their delicate wings adding flashes of color to the already vibrant landscape. As the day progressed, The other camels gradually moved closer, their curiosity overcoming their initial wariness. The eldest of the three, a female with knowing eyes and a dignified bearing, approached first. Silver hairs speckled her face, testament to her years of desert wisdom. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of one who had faced countless challenges and emerged stronger for each trial. She examined Khalil with gentle sniffs, her experienced gaze assessing his condition. There was something maternal in her inspection, a recognition of his youth and vulnerability that transcended the differences between their herds. She noted his weakened state, but also recognized the resilience that had allowed him to survive when many others would have perished. Rami watched this interaction with alert interest, ready to intervene if necessary. But the female camel's intentions appeared peaceful. After her thorough examination, she made a soft sound, not quite a call, but an acknowledgement of acceptance. The sound resonated deep in her throat, a rumbling hum that conveyed more meaning than human language could capture. The other two camels, seemingly taking their cue from her, moved forward to complete their own investigations of the newcomer. One was a male of middle years, his hump full and healthy, indicating good nutrition and strength. The other was a younger female, perhaps only a few seasons older than Khalil himself, her manner more playful and less reserved than her companions. For Khalil, this tentative welcome stirred conflicting emotions. These were not his herd, not his mother. Yet their familiar forms and scents awakened both homesickness and hope. The ache of separation from his own kind remained a hollow presence in his chest. But alongside it grew something new, the possibility of belonging somewhere else, with someone else. He responded with the awkward enthusiasm of youth, his interactions clumsy but earnest as he navigated this new social dynamic. He mimicked their greeting sounds, his younger voice higher and less controlled. But the effort was appreciated by the small group, who exchanged what could only be described as amused glances at his attempts. The oasis, it seemed, was a place of unexpected connections, a crossroads where different paths and species could converge. Ancient Bedouin tales spoke of such places as magical domains where the normal rules of nature were suspended, allowing for wonders not possible elsewhere. In the harsh reality of the desert, such stories were usually dismissed as the fanciful imaginings of minds affected by heat and isolation. Yet here, in this verdant pocket of life, the boundary between legend and reality seemed remarkably thin. As the sun climbed higher, casting shorter shadows across the sanctuary, Khalil found himself adapting to this new reality. His ordeal had changed him, aging him beyond his years in some ways while leaving him achingly young in others. The elder female camel, whom Khalil came to think of as Noura, light in the language of the desert peoples, seemed to take a particular interest in his welfare. Throughout the day, she showed him which plants were most nourishing, which to avoid, and how to extract the maximum moisture from those he consumed. Her lessons were delivered with patience and an understanding of his limitations, never pushing too hard, always allowing him time to rest when his strength began to flag. The younger female, with her playful demeanor and quick movements, provided a different kind of companionship. She would periodically approach Khalil, initiating brief games of chase that lasted only until he tired, then waiting patiently until he was ready to play again. Rami remained a constant presence throughout the day, never straying far from Khalil's side. The stallion's behavior puzzled the other inhabitants of the oasis, who maintained traditional boundaries between species. Yet there was something undeniably natural in the bond between horse and camel. a connection forged in crisis but evolving into something deeper. Even Noura, with all her years of desert wisdom, watched their interactions with a mixture of confusion and respect. She had never witnessed such a relationship, yet could not deny its authenticity or the obvious benefits it brought to the young camel under her emerging care. As evening approached once more, bringing relief from the day's heat, Khalil settled beside the water to watch the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. The transition from day to night in the desert was a spectacular display. The sun transforming from a white-hot disk to a massive orange sphere as it approached the horizon. The sky around it shifted through shades of gold, amber, crimson, and finally deep purple as darkness reclaimed its territory. Rami stood nearby, his powerful silhouette etched against the fiery backdrop. The female camel and her companions had integrated Khalil into their small group, creating a protective semicircle that included both the young camel and his equine guardian. The oasis had offered them sanctuary, but questions remained about what would follow. Khalil's original herd was lost to him, perhaps forever. The desert was vast, and nomadic herds followed ancient migration routes that spanned hundreds of miles. The chances of reunion grew slimmer with each passing day. Rami's solitary existence had been irrevocably altered by his choice to save the young camel. The wild stallion, once the embodiment of unfettered freedom, had willingly accepted the responsibility of another's welfare. The path forward was as uncertain as the desert itself, constantly shifting, full of hidden dangers and unexpected blessings. As darkness settled once more over the oasis, Khalil found himself contemplating these questions with a clarity that would have been impossible just days before. The storm that had nearly claimed his life had also set him on an entirely new path, one shared with the most unlikely of companions. Whatever challenges awaited them beyond the sanctuary of the oasis, they would face them together, bound by something more powerful than circumstance or convention. The stars emerged one by one, filling the night sky with their cold, distant light. The same stars that had guided desert travelers for countless generations. They offered no answers to the questions that lingered in the young camel's mind, but their eternal presence provided a strange comfort nonetheless. Under the watchful eyes of the ancient stars, horse and camel rested side by side, their breathing falling into synchronous rhythm. Two desert souls finding harmony in a world defined by survival. The night creatures of the oasis began their activities around them, the cycle of life continuing in its perfect balance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and decisions. But for now, in this moment of peace, everything was as it should be. The desert had tried to claim Khalil's life, but instead had given him something unexpected. A new family, forged not of blood, but of something equally powerful. The shared will to live, to protect, and to find meaning in the harshest of circumstances. The days at the oasis settled into a gentle rhythm for Khalil and Rami. Each sunrise brought renewed strength to the young camel's limbs, his body healing under the nurturing combination of rest, proper nourishment, and companionship. The hollow places between his ribs gradually filled out, and the dull cast to his coat was replaced by a healthier sheen. Even his gait transformed, evolving from the uncertain stumbling of near death to the more confident movements of youth reclaiming its rightful vigor. The transformation was remarkable to behold, like watching a wilted plant revive under the blessing of rainfall. With each passing day, more of Khalil's true personality emerged from beneath the shadow of trauma, curious, occasionally mischievous, and possessing a resilience that belied his tender age. The oasis itself seemed to participate in this healing process. Its waters remained cool and clear, replenished by hidden underground springs that had flowed uninterrupted for centuries. The date palms offered generous shade during the most punishing hours of desert heat, their fronds creating dappled patterns across the ground that danced with each subtle breeze. Smaller plants flourished in the microclimate created by the water source, hardy desert flowers with surprisingly vibrant blooms, succulent vegetation rich with moisture, and various grasses that provided ideal grazing. It was a perfect sanctuary, a place where the harsh realities of the surrounding desert were held temporarily at bay. Noura and her small band had fully accepted the unusual pair into their daily routines. The elder female camel seemed to recognize something special in the relationship between Khalil and Rami, a bond that defied natural order yet functioned with undeniable harmony. She observed them with wise eyes that had witnessed many desert seasons, perhaps understanding that survival sometimes required adaptations beyond conventional wisdom. Her own history remained a mystery. The circumstances that had separated her from a larger herd, the experiences that had taught her such profound desert wisdom. But her acceptance of the horse-camel partnership suggested a mind unconstrained by ordinary camel thinking. The younger female camel, whom Khalil had mentally named Layla for her playful evening antics, had become something of a surrogate sibling. Though older by several seasons, she approached life with an exuberance that matched Khalil's recovering spirit. Their play sessions grew longer and more elaborate as his strength returned, chasing games that wound between the palm trunks, mock wrestling matches that ended with both young camels sprawled comically in the soft sand, and exploration expeditions to the oasis perimeter, always conducted under Noura's watchful eye. The male camel, a stoic figure Khalil came to think of as Sahar, dawn in the language of desert peoples, maintained a more reserved demeanor. His contribution to Khalil's recovery came in the form of quiet protection and occasional demonstrations of proper camel behavior: how to most efficiently browse the available vegetation, how to communicate through subtle body language, and how to maintain dignity even in moments of uncertainty. Rami's adaptation to this improvised family unit was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of their time at the oasis. The wild stallion, once the embodiment of solitary freedom, had seamlessly integrated himself into a protective role that extended beyond just Khalil. Though his primary bond remained with the young camel he had rescued, he gradually expanded his vigilance to include the other 3 camels. His daily patrols of the oasis perimeter became a reassuring routine, his powerful presence a deterrent to smaller predators that might otherwise have troubled the peaceful sanctuary. At night, he would still position himself protectively near Khalil, but increasingly allowed the other camels to complete the circle, creating a communal sleeping arrangement that benefited all. On the 7th morning since their arrival, a subtle change disturbed the oasis's tranquility. The day had begun like any other. The gradual lightening of the eastern sky, the first calls of waking birds, the gentle stirring of the palm fronds in the morning breeze. Khalil had awakened to find Rami already alert, as was his custom. The young camel had stretched his legs, feeling the pleasant sensation of muscles that had regained their proper tone before ambling to the water's edge for his morning drink. The surface of the pool reflected the emerging day perfectly, a mirror image sky gradually transitioning from the deep purple of night to the soft pinks and golds of dawn. Rami was the first to notice, his head lifting sharply from the water's edge, ears pivoting toward the eastern perimeter. The stallion's nostrils flared as he tested the air, his entire body tensing like a drawn bow. A low rumble, almost too deep to be heard, vibrated in his chest, a warning sound rarely employed. Khalil, who had been playfully chasing insects nearby, immediately responded to his companion's alertness, instinctively moving closer to the horse's protective presence. The young camel's own senses, though less acute than Rami's, began to register something amiss. A subtle shift in the oasis atmosphere, a new scent carried on the morning breeze, a telling silence where birdsong should have continued. Something approaches. Noura seemed to communicate through a series of low grunts and subtle body movements. Her experienced eyes narrowed as she gazed toward the eastern dunes, her body shifting to create a barrier between the potential threat and the younger camels. The other camels responded to her warning, gathering closer together, their own senses now attuned to the disturbance. Sahar moved to Noura's side, his larger frame complementing her protective stance, while Layla positioned herself near Khalil, her usual playfulness replaced by alert caution. The source of their unease materialized at the oasis edge. A pack of desert wolves, their lean bodies moving with predatory grace between the outer palms. There were 7 of them, their fur the color of sun-bleached bone, eyes glinting with calculated hunger. Unlike the popular image of wolves in colder climates, these desert hunters were smaller, with larger ears for heat dissipation and leaner frames adapted for efficiency in an environment where prey was scarce and water scarcer still. They moved as a coordinated unit, spreading out to surround the small watering hole in a strategy honed through countless generations of survival in the unforgiving desert. The wolves' appearance was itself a testament to the severity of the ongoing drought. These predators typically avoided direct confrontation with larger animals like mature camels and horses, preferring to target smaller, more vulnerable prey. Their presence at the oasis, approaching in broad daylight rather than under the cover of darkness, spoke of desperation, of hunting grounds depleted beyond sustainability, of thirst that overrode caution. Their ribs showed clearly beneath their taut hides, and their movements, while still graceful, carried the slight hesitation of creatures conserving dwindling energy reserves. These were not the opportunistic jackals that occasionally scavenged near the oasis. Desert wolves represented a more significant threat. Intelligent, patient hunters, capable of taking down prey much larger than themselves through teamwork and endurance. The drought had pushed them beyond their normal hunting grounds, desperation driving them toward the relative abundance of the oasis. In their calculating gaze was the cold arithmetic of survival, the recognition of Khalil as the weakest link in the oasis hierarchy, the assessment of risk versus reward in challenging the larger animals, the patience to wait for a single moment of inattention that could be exploited. Rami positioned himself between the approaching predators and Khalil, his powerful body radiating protective intent. The stallion's muscles rippled beneath his copper coat as he pawed the ground, sending a clear warning to the encroaching wolves. His ears flattened against his skull, teeth bared in a silent challenge that required no translation across species. The transformation in his demeanor was striking. From the gentle companion of recent days to a formidable defender capable of delivering devastating damage with hoof and teeth. His tail raised to full height, a natural flag signaling his readiness to fight rather than flee. Noura and the other adult camels formed a defensive circle, their large bodies creating a living barrier with Khalil secured in the center. Unlike many herbivores, mature camels were formidable when threatened, capable of delivering powerful kicks that could shatter bone. Their long necks allowed them to maintain visual contact with the predators, while keeping their vulnerable legs protected within the formation. The wolves recognized this danger, maintaining their distance while assessing the situation with calculating eyes. They circled slowly, looking for any gap in the defenses, any momentary weakness that might be exploited. The standoff stretched into tense minutes, neither side willing to initiate direct confrontation. The wolves circled slowly, testing for weakness, occasionally feinting forward only to retreat when met with unified defense. Their primary focus seemed fixed on Khalil, the smallest and most vulnerable target despite his recent recovery. The pack communicated through nearly imperceptible signals, ear positions, tail movements, subtle changes in posture that coordinated their actions with an efficiency that spoke of long association and successful hunts. Their strategy was clear: to separate the young camel from his protectors, to create confusion and division among the defenders that would create an exploitable opportunity. The oasis itself seemed to hold its breath during this confrontation. The birds had fallen silent. The insects stilled their constant hum. Even the breeze appeared to pause, leaving the palm fronds motionless against the brightening sky. The water's surface remained undisturbed, reflecting the tense tableau like a perfect mirror. Predator and prey engaged in an ancient dance whose choreography was written in the genetic memory of both participants. Time seemed to stretch and distort, each moment extending into what felt like hours as the deadly calculation continued. As the sun climbed higher, casting shorter shadows and intensifying the desert heat, the lead wolf, a battle-scarred male with one clouded eye, made a decisive move. With a barely perceptible signal to his pack, he darted forward toward a perceived gap in the defensive formation. Two other wolves simultaneously charged from different angles, their strategy aimed at dividing the defenders' attention. The remaining pack members held their positions, ready to exploit any advantage created by this coordinated assault. The attack was executed with the precision of countless previous hunts, a testament to the wolves' intelligence and adaptability. What followed was a chaotic blur of motion and sound. Rami reared up, massive hooves striking out with devastating precision, connecting with the shoulder of one attacker and sending it tumbling back with a pained yelp. The injured wolf scrambled to regain its footing, limping noticeably as it retreated to a safer distance. Noura and Sahar lashed out with powerful kicks, their long legs weaponized by evolution for exactly this purpose. The male camel's strike caught a wolf mid-leap, the impact producing an audible crack that suggested serious damage. The younger female maintained position directly over Khalil, her body serving as living shelter, her warning hisses and stamping feet deterring any predator that came too close. Khalil himself was not entirely passive during this confrontation. Though protected by his companions, the young camel's survival instincts had fully awakened. He maintained the smallest possible profile, tucking his gangly legs beneath him and keeping his neck low, minimizing the target he presented. His eyes, wide with fear but clear with awareness, tracked the movements around him, his body tensed to respond to direction from his protectors. This was not the helpless panic of prey, resigned to capture, but the alert readiness of a young animal learning the harsh lessons of survival. The wolves retreated temporarily, regrouping at a safer distance, but their hunger-driven determination remained undiminished. The injured members of the pack were quickly integrated back into the formation, their individual pain subordinated to the collective need. The one-eyed leader paced at their center, his gaze never leaving the defensive circle of larger animals, his mind visibly calculating new approaches. The oasis had become a battlefield, the peaceful sanctuary transformed into contested territory with survival as the ultimate prize. As the standoff resumed, an unexpected development shifted the dynamic. From the western approach to the oasis, a new sound emerged, the rhythmic jingling of metal and the muffled footfalls of numerous hooves and feet. Human voices carried on the morning air, growing louder with each passing moment. The distinctive call of domesticated camels, a sound both familiar and different from the vocalizations of Noura's small band, accompanied the approaching group. The clink of metal against metal suggested weapons or tools. The creaking of leather spoke of saddles and harnesses. And beneath it all was the unmistakable cadence of human language. Words exchanged with the confidence of apex predators secure in their dominion over the desert realm. The wolves' ears perked at these new sounds, their heads turning in unison toward this potential new threat. The one-eyed leader assessed the changing situation with calculating efficiency, weighing hunger against the increasing risk. Humans represented a different category of danger, not just immediate physical threat, but generational enemy, carriers of fire and metal. Hunters who killed beyond their immediate needs and harbored specific enmity for wolves. With a low growl that seemed to communicate both frustration and patience, he signaled retreat. The pack melted back into the desert landscape with the same fluid grace that had marked their arrival, disappearing among the dunes like ghosts returning to the realm of shadows. Their departure was not a surrender, but a tactical withdrawal, a decision to conserve energy and seek easier prey elsewhere. The look in the lead wolf's eye as he glanced back toward the oasis promised that this encounter was postponed rather than concluded. Rami's tension did not diminish with the wolf's departure. If anything, his alertness intensified, his focus now directed toward the approaching caravan. His experience with humans was evidenced in the specific quality of his vigilance, not the natural caution he might show toward unfamiliar animals, but a deeper wariness born of past interactions. His scars, visible against his copper coat when the light caught them at certain angles, hinted at a history with humans that had not been entirely benevolent. Khalil, sensing his protector's continued concern, remained close, his own limited experience offering no context for understanding this new development. Nora, however, displayed a markedly different reaction. Rather than alarm, her demeanor suggested recognition, perhaps even anticipation. Her posture relaxed from defensive readiness to something approaching welcome. She produced a series of deep, rumbling calls that seemed intended to announce their presence to the approaching travelers. Sahar and Layla followed her lead, their bodies' language shifting to reflect her apparent comfort with the approaching humans. This divergent response created a moment of confusion for Khalil. The contrast between Rami's tension and Noura's acceptance presenting contradictory messages about how to interpret this new development. The caravan crested the final dune overlooking the oasis, a procession of humans, camels, and horses, moving with the practiced efficiency of those accustomed to desert travel. Their appearance marked a stark contrast to the natural inhabitants of the oasis. Colorful fabrics adorned both people and animals. Metal ornaments caught and reflected the sunlight, and the structured order of their movement spoke of civilization rather than wilderness. The humans themselves were wrapped in layers of cloth that protected them from sun and sand, indigo and white turbans for the men, more colorful veils for the women, their faces partially obscured but their eyes alert and assessing as they surveyed the oasis before them. The caravan consisted of perhaps 20 humans and twice that number of animals. The camels were primarily dromedaries like Khalil and Noura's group, but taller and more uniformly colored, their harnesses decorated with tassels and small mirrors that flashed in the sunlight. Several horses accompanied them, not wild like Rami, but clearly domesticated. Their coats groomed to a high sheen, their movements disciplined and responsive to subtle commands from their riders. Loaded pack animals brought up the rear of the procession, bearing mysterious bundles secured with elaborate knots and covered with protective cloths. At the caravan's head rode a man whose bearing suggested leadership. His indigo turban stood out against the predominantly earth-toned landscape, and the camel he rode, a magnificent white dromedary with elaborate tasseled harness, moved with the confident stride of an animal accustomed to respect. The man's face, partially visible beneath his head covering, bore the weathered texture of one who had spent decades under the desert sun. Deep lines radiated from the corners of his eyes, evidence of a lifetime squinting against brightness and sand. But those eyes themselves were remarkably clear and penetrating, missing nothing as they surveyed the scene before him. The caravan leader raised his hand, bringing the entire procession to a coordinated halt at the oasis perimeter. His weathered face registered surprise as he surveyed the unusual grouping before him, particularly the protective positioning of the wild stallion beside the young camel. Even for one who had spent a lifetime traversing the desert's vast expanses, such a sight represented something beyond ordinary experience. He leaned forward slightly in his saddle, as if doubting the evidence of his eyes, then straightened with the air of one who has witnessed many desert miracles and accepted that some aspects of the natural world defied simple explanation. Allah has blessed our journey with wonders. He spoke to his companions, his voice carrying clearly across the intervening space. Behold what awaits us at Bir al-Ajaib. The name, Well of Miracles, seemed fitting for a place that had already witnessed so many unlikely events. The designation suggested this was not merely a random water source, but a location with established significance in the cultural geography of the desert peoples. Perhaps stories had been told of this place around campfires for generations. Legends of unusual occurrences or unexpected encounters preserved in the oral tradition that sustained knowledge across time in a landscape where written records were impractical luxuries. As the caravan began its careful approach into the oasis proper, Khalil pressed closer to Rami, uncertain whether these newcomers represented yet another threat or something altogether different. The stallion maintained his protective stance, muscles tensed beneath his gleaming coat, eyes tracking every movement of the approaching humans, with particular attention to their hands and any objects they carried. His breathing remained controlled but deep, nostrils flaring to capture every nuance of scent information, ears swiveling to monitor sounds from all directions simultaneously. Noura moved forward with confident familiarity, approaching the lead rider and his white camel with what appeared to be recognition. The elder female camel exchanged greeting behaviors with the caravan leader's mount, touching noses and sharing breath in the traditional camel manner of acknowledgement. This interaction suggested a prior relationship, perhaps even regular seasonal encounters that had established trust between them. The caravan leader's mount responded with equal familiarity, the two animals communicating through subtle movements and soft vocalizations that contained information inaccessible to human understanding. The man dismounted with the fluid grace of one who had performed this action countless times. His movements were economical and precise, displaying none of the stiffness that might be expected in someone of his apparent years. He approached Noura with an outstretched hand, speaking in low, melodic tones. The language was Arabic, but a dialect particular to the desert nomads, rich with specialized vocabulary for describing the nuances of sand, wind, and water that were essential knowledge for desert survival. The female camel allowed his touch without hesitation, confirming some prior relationship between them. His hand moved with practiced confidence along her neck and shoulder, his touch both assessment and greeting, checking her condition while simultaneously renewing their acquaintance. "Noura has returned to us once again," the man announced to his companions. "And she has brought interesting new friends to Bir al-Ajaib." His words suggested that Noura's presence at the oasis was not coincidental, but part of some established pattern. Perhaps she had once been part of their caravan before circumstances separated her. Or maybe she was one of the semi-wild camels that maintained loose affiliations with human groups while preserving a measure of independence. The easy way she accepted his touch indicated she was no stranger to human handling, though her clear bond with the wild camels suggested she had adapted to life beyond human dominion. His gaze settled on Rami and Khalil with undisguised interest. The stallion maintained his protective stance, muscles tensed for potential flight or fight. The man seemed to recognize the horse's wild nature and made no move to approach directly, instead crouching down to appear less threatening. This posture, diminishing his height advantage, was the action of someone deeply versed in animal behavior, understanding that vertical dominance could be interpreted as aggression. His eyes, however, missed nothing as they assessed the unusual pair. Noting Khalil's improving but still recovering condition, the protective positioning of the stallion, and most significantly, the unnatural bond between species that would normally maintain distance from each other. The desert offers its greatest gifts to those who survive its harshest tests, he said, seemingly addressing both animals, though his words were meant equally for his human companions. These two have clearly faced such trials together. The statement reflected a philosophy shaped by generations of desert existence, an understanding that the most valuable lessons emerged from the most difficult challenges. In the merciless environment of the deep desert, survival itself was achievement enough. But to forge new connections, to adapt beyond the limitations of instinct and tradition, represented something worthy of particular respect. The man's tone carried no hint of desire to separate the unusual companions or to impose human authority over their arrangement. Instead, there was something approaching reverence in his assessment, recognition that he was witnessing something rare and significant. As the caravan established its temporary camp at the oasis edge, a new chapter began to unfold. The humans moved with practiced efficiency, erecting tents and establishing order without disturbing the natural balance of the sanctuary. Women unloaded cooking implements and began preparing food. Children were assigned to water the animals, and men established a perimeter that would provide security without claiming excessive territory. They maintained a respectful distance from Rami and Khalil, though their curious glances revealed their fascination with the unusual pair. Occasional comments passed between them. Observations about the stallion's exceptional conformation, speculation about the circumstances that had brought horse and camel together, and what appeared to be discussions about the significance of such an unusual partnership. Nora's behavior suggested these were not strangers, but familiar seasonal visitors. Perhaps a nomadic tribe that followed established routes between permanent water sources. Her ease in their presence gradually influenced the younger female camel and the male to approach the encampment, where they were greeted with recognition and offered choice morsels from the travelers' provisions. The humans interacted with these camels with the comfortable familiarity of long association, addressing them by name and examining them with the practiced eyes of those whose survival depended on the health and well-being of their animal companions. Khalil observed this interaction with growing curiosity, his natural camel instincts recognizing something familiar in the relationship between these humans and their animals. Somewhere deep in his developing mind, ancestral memories stirred. Echoes of the ancient partnership between camels and humans that had defined desert existence for millennia. Though he had been born to a wild herd, the genetic heritage of his species included thousands of years of domestication, creating an inherent predisposition to understand human behavior and respond to human cues. He watched as the caravan camels knelt to allow unloading, as they accepted guidance with minimal direction, as they positioned themselves to provide shade for the smallest human children. These behaviors spoke of a complex relationship that transcended simple dominance, a cooperative arrangement that had allowed both species to thrive in an environment that would have defeated either alone. Rami, however, maintained his vigilance. Unlike Khalil, the stallion's experiences with humans likely contained darker chapters. The scars that marked his otherwise magnificent coat hinted at a history that justified his caution. His posture remained alert, his position carefully calculated to allow quick escape if necessary. His attention divided between monitoring the humans and ensuring Khalil's safety. Yet even he seemed to recognize that these particular humans presented no immediate threat, allowing Khalil to watch the camp activities from a safer distance without attempting to drive him away from his observations. The caravan's arrival transformed the atmosphere of the oasis. What had been a quiet sanctuary became a bustling center of activity. Cooking fires were established, sending fragrant smoke spiraling into the clear desert air. Children's laughter, a sound previously absent from the oasis, rang out as they completed their assigned tasks and found time for play. The domesticated animals settled into their own routines, drinking from the water source in organized shifts and finding comfortable places to rest in the shade. It was as if the oasis itself had awakened to its true purpose, not merely as a watering hole, but as a crossroads where different lives and journeys intersected. As evening approached, transforming the sky into a canvas of spectacular color, the caravan leader sat cross-legged at the edge of their camp, his gaze fixed thoughtfully on the unusual pair. In his eyes was the look of one who recognized significance beyond the immediate circumstances. A man accustomed to reading the desert's subtle messages, his white camel rested nearby, occasionally exchanging glances with Noura in what appeared to be their own private communication. Several other elders from the caravan had joined him, their postures respectful, their conversation low and measured as befitted a discussion of important matters. "The stallion who protects the camel," he mused to his companions as they gathered for the evening meal. Such partnerships are not formed by chance, but by the hand of destiny. We would be wise to consider what message Allah sends us through their presence. His words reflected the desert dweller's worldview, an understanding that natural phenomena carry deeper meanings, that the patterns of animal behavior might contain wisdom for those perceptive enough to recognize it. In a landscape where survival margins were narrow and mistakes often fatal, the ability to interpret such signs could mean the difference between prosperity and disaster. The unusual bond between Rami and Khalil represented something outside normal experience, an anomaly that demanded interpretation. The conversation among the elders continued as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Their discussion touched on practical matters: the conditions of distant water sources, reports of tribal movements across traditional territories, the prospects for trade at their destination, but returned repeatedly to the significance of the horse-camel partnership. Various interpretations were offered, each reflecting the particular wisdom and experience of the speaker. Some saw it as an omen of unexpected alliances in their own future, others as a reminder that survival sometimes required abandoning traditional limitations, still others as evidence of divine intervention in the natural order for purposes beyond human understanding. As darkness embraced the oasis once more, Khalil settled against Rami's warm flank, their now familiar sleeping arrangement providing mutual comfort. Though they maintained some distance from the human encampment, the sounds and scents of the caravan created a new dimension to their nighttime experience. The murmur of human voices, the aromatic smoke from cooking fires, the occasional jingling of metal ornaments stirred by the evening breeze. The young camel's mind filled with new images and experiences. Wolves and humans, danger and intrigue, all swirling together in his developing consciousness. The simple existence he had known with his birth herd seemed increasingly distant, replaced by a more complex reality of shifting alliances and unexpected connections. The campfires of the human travelers cast dancing shadows across the oasis, their soft glow a counterpoint to the brilliant desert stars overhead. Tomorrow would bring new developments in this unfolding story, new challenges and opportunities for the unlikely companions. But for tonight, the oasis held them all in its protective embrace, a temporary peace in a world defined by constant change. As Khalil drifted toward sleep, one certainty remained unchanging. Whatever came next, he would face it alongside Rami, their improbable bond now the fixed point around which his young world revolved. The desert had nearly claimed his life, but in doing so, had given him something perhaps even more valuable, a connection that transcended the ordinary boundaries of nature. A friendship forged in the crucible of survival that had emerged stronger than the circumstances of its creation. In the vast, unpredictable expanse of the desert, such certainties were rare treasures indeed. The following days brought a gradual transformation in the relationship between the caravan members and the unusual pair of companions. What began as cautious observation evolved into something approaching mutual acceptance. The humans maintained a respectful distance from Rami, recognizing the wild stallion's boundaries while showing increasing interest in Khalil. The young camel, for his part, found himself drawn to the activities of the encampment, his natural curiosity overcoming his initial wariness. Khalil's mornings still began with Rami, their established routine a comforting constant amid the changes. They would drink together at the water's edge as dawn painted the sky, then explore the oasis perimeter, the stallion seemingly intent on teaching his young companion the essential skill of vigilance. But increasingly, as the day progressed, Khalil would drift closer to the human camp, observing their activities with undisguised fascination. The caravan leader, whom the others addressed as Sheikh Malik, took particular notice of the young camel's interest. On the third morning after their arrival, as Khalil lingered at what he considered a safe distance from the camp, the elder man emerged from his tent, carrying something in his weathered hands. "Your friend has good instincts," Sheikh Malik spoke softly to Rami, who stood alert several yards behind Khalil. "But he is still young enough to be curious rather than fearful." The sheikh moved with deliberate slowness, eventually crouching down to Khalil's eye level. In his outstretched palm lay a handful of dried dates, a desert delicacy that even a young camel could recognize as valuable. The man made no attempt to approach closer, simply remaining in his position, allowing Khalil to make his own decision. The young camel's nostrils flared as he caught the sweet scent. He glanced back at Rami, as if seeking permission or guidance. The stallion remained watchful, but made no move to intervene, his posture communicating neither encouragement nor warning, simply alert observation. After a moment's hesitation, Khalil took a tentative step forward, then another, his gangly legs carrying him toward the offered treat. The distance between them closed inch by inch, until finally, his soft muzzle delicately plucked the dates from the sheikh's palm. The man remained motionless during this exchange, his weathered face creasing into a smile that deepened the lines around his eyes. "Good," he murmured as Khalil savored the sweet fruits. Trust must be earned slowly, like water collecting in a desert well. This small interaction marked a turning point. Each day that followed saw Khalil venture a little closer to the human activities, while Sheikh Malik demonstrated remarkable patience, never pushing for more familiarity than the young camel was prepared to offer. The other caravan members followed their leader's example, moving with deliberate calm when Khalil was nearby, speaking in soft tones and offering occasional treats without expectation. Rami's response to this developing relationship was complex. The stallion never fully relaxed his vigilance, but neither did he attempt to prevent Khalil's explorations. He maintained a watchful presence, positioning himself to intervene if necessary. but allowing his young companion the freedom to satisfy his growing curiosity. It was as if the horse understood that Khalil's future might necessarily include human interaction, and was permitting these carefully controlled experiences as preparation. On the fifth evening after the caravan's arrival, as the communal cooking fires cast their golden glow across the oasis, Sheikh Malik invited several of his companions to join him at the edge of their camp. Their position, deliberately chosen, allowed them to converse while remaining visible to Rami and Khalil, who rested some distance away. "The young one grows stronger each day," observed an elder woman, her hands busy with weaving even as her sharp eyes assessed Khalil's improving condition. "The wild stallion has done well by him." "Indeed, Farah," the sheikh agreed. "But I wonder about his original herd. The drought has driven many wild groups far from their traditional territories." A younger man, whose decorated saddle and fine riding camel marked him as a scout, leaned forward with interest. "During my last journey to the eastern valleys, I encountered a large herd moving north toward the stone pools. They seemed distressed, moving faster than wisdom would dictate in this heat." "Could they be searching for one of their own?" asked another elder, his beard white against his dark skin. Sheikh Malik considered this possibility, his fingers absently stroking his own silver-streaked beard. "Perhaps. But the desert is vast, and chances of reunion slim. The young one seems to have found a new path. The horse protects him as fiercely as any mother camel would protect her calf." Farah noted. "Such bonds are rare between different kinds." "Rarer still is what I suspect about this particular stallion," the sheikh replied, his voice dropping slightly. "Look closely at his markings, the particular copper of his coat, the white star between his eyes. Does he not resemble the desert stallions of the Al-Hadid bloodline?" This observation sent a ripple of surprised murmurs through the small gathering. The scout leaned forward, studying Rami with renewed interest. "The Al-Hadid horses are treasured possessions of the northern tribes," he said. "They guard their bloodlines jealously and would never allow such an animal to run wild." "Unless he was not given that choice," Sheikh Malik responded. 4 seasons ago, there were rumors of a raid gone wrong, a prized stallion that escaped during conflict between tribal factions. Some said he was wounded but managed to flee into the deep desert. "The scars on his flank," Farah whispered. "They could be from weapons." The sheikh nodded solemnly. "The northern tribes have been searching for this horse, or one very like him, for several seasons. They believe the bloodline carries special qualities: endurance beyond normal limits, intelligence that borders on the supernatural, and loyalty that once earned cannot be broken. If this is indeed their lost prize," the scout said, "carefully, there would be great reward for those who returned him." A heavy silence followed this statement, broken only by the crackling of the nearby fire and the distant night sounds of the oasis. Sheikh Malik's expression grew contemplative as he gazed at the unusual pair, the magnificent stallion and the young camel resting beside him. "There are many kinds of value in this world," he finally said. "Some can be measured in coins and trade goods, others cannot." The gathering fell silent, each member considering the implications of their leader's words. The firelight played across their thoughtful faces, illuminating a complex mixture of considerations, practical needs of their community balanced against deeper principles that guided their desert existence. As the humans continued their discussion, Khalil remained unaware of its significance for his future. The young camel had settled comfortably against Rami's warm flank, his improving health evident in the peaceful rhythm of his breathing. The stallion, however, seemed unusually alert, his ears swiveling toward the human conversation as if he could somehow comprehend the words being exchanged. Perhaps some animal instinct warned him that he was the subject of their discussion, or perhaps it was merely coincidence that kept him watchful on this particular evening. The night deepened around the oasis, stars emerging in their thousands across the vast desert sky. The human camp gradually quieted as members of the caravan sought rest in preparation for whatever the following day might bring. Only Sheikh Malik remained awake, seated cross-legged before the dying embers of the central fire, his gaze alternating between the glowing coals and the silhouettes of horse and camel against the starlit horizon. "The right path is rarely the easiest one," he murmured to himself, words carried away by the gentle night breeze, lost among the rustling palm fronds overhead. Morning arrived, with the soft golden light characteristic of desert dawns. The oasis stirred to life, birds announcing the new day from their perches among the palms, insects resuming their constant hum, humans emerging from their tents to begin their daily routines. Khalil awakened to find Rami already alert, the stallion's attention focused on unusual activity within the caravan camp. The humans were preparing to depart. Tents were being dismantled with practiced efficiency, pack animals loaded with carefully balanced bundles, water containers filled for the journey ahead. The temporary community that had formed around the oasis was dissolving, reorganizing itself into traveling formation. Sheikh Malik stood at the center of this activity, directing with minimal gestures, his authority evident in the respectful responses of those around him. Occasionally, his gaze would drift toward Rami and Khalil, a thoughtful expression crossing his weathered features before he returned his attention to the preparations. As the morning progressed, the caravan took shape at the western edge of the oasis. A line of camels, horses, and humans oriented toward distant horizons. Only when everything was in readiness did Sheikh Malik approach the unusual pair, moving with the same deliberate calm he had established in their previous interactions. "The desert offers many paths," he said, addressing Khalil directly, though his words seemed meant equally for Rami. "Some we choose, others choose us." From a pouch at his waist, the sheikh produced several dried dates, the treat that had first bridged the distance between them. He placed them on a flat stone at a respectful distance, then straightened slowly. "We journey west toward the trading settlements at the desert's edge, following ancient routes known to my people for generations. The way is hard, but water sources are reliable, especially for those who know where to look." He paused, glancing toward Noura and the other two camels who had formed Khalil's adoptive family at the oasis. They had already integrated themselves with the caravan animals, standing patiently in the assembled line. "Your friends have chosen to travel with us, as they have done in seasons past. The oasis will remain, but alone it offers limited prospects compared to the wider world beyond." With these words, Sheikh Malik produced a length of soft rope, not a restraint, but an invitation. He laid it beside the dates, its presence a silent question rather than a demand. Then, with a respectful nod toward Rami, he backed away several paces before turning to rejoin his waiting caravan. Khalil found himself facing an unexpected choice. The oasis had been his sanctuary, the place of his recovery and new connections. Yet the departure of Noura, Sahar, and Layla would leave a significant void in his daily existence. He looked toward them, noting how comfortably they had resumed their place among the domesticated animals. Then he turned to Rami, seeking guidance from the companion who had saved his life and protected him through their shared journey. The stallion's response was unexpected. After a moment's consideration, Rami stepped forward and delicately picked up the rope in his teeth. He did not carry it to Sheikh Malik, as the humans might have expected. but instead dropped it before Khalil, as if indicating that the choice belonged to the young camel alone. This gesture, so deliberate and thoughtful, seemed to transcend normal animal behavior. It suggested a level of understanding and empathy that defied simple explanation. Rami was neither encouraging Khalil to join the humans nor urging him to remain at the oasis. He was acknowledging the young camel's right to determine his own path forward. Sheikh Malik, observing from a distance, nodded slightly as if confirming some private thought. The Al-Hadid wisdom shows itself, he murmured to Farah, who stood beside him. The legends speak true. Khalil stared at the rope lying in the sand before him, then at the waiting caravan, and finally back to Rami. The bond between them had transcended their differences, creating a connection that defied natural order. Whatever choice he made would necessarily affect them both, with a decision that seemed to carry the weight of destiny. Khalil gently took the rope in his mouth, then moved toward Sheikh Malik, stopping halfway between the human and Rami. He turned his head back toward the stallion, the rope still dangling from his mouth, his intention clear even without words. He would go, but only if his protector accompanied him. For a long moment, Rami remained motionless, his powerful body silhouetted against the morning sun. The scars of his past and his wild nature argued for continued freedom, for rejection of human proximity. Yet his commitment to Khalil represented a different kind of bond, one that had already led him far beyond the normal boundaries of his existence. With fluid grace, the stallion moved forward to stand beside his young companion. He made no move to take the rope, maintaining his independence while simultaneously indicating his choice to remain with Khalil regardless of the path selected. Sheikh Malik accepted the rope from Khalil's mouth with a gentle hand, his eyes reflecting deep understanding of the significance of what had just transpired. "So be it," he said softly. "The journey continues for all of us." As the caravan began its westward movement, Khalil found himself walking alongside Noura, the familiar presence of his adoptive camel family providing reassurance amid this new transition. The rope attached to his improvised halter remained loose in Sheikh Malik's hand, a connection rather than a constraint, an acknowledgement of choice rather than an imposition of control. Rami paced freely beside them, accepting no rope or restraint, yet clearly part of their traveling group by his own decision. The humans watched him with a mixture of awe and respect, maintaining careful distance, understanding that his presence was a gift rather than a possession. The oasis receded behind them as they crested the first dune, its green abundance gradually diminishing against the golden expanse of the surrounding desert. Khalil glanced back once, memorizing the place that had offered sanctuary when he most needed it, before turning his gaze toward the horizon ahead. The caravan moved with the measured pace of experienced desert travelers, following ancient pathways known only to those whose ancestors had crossed these sands for countless generations. Their destination remained unknown to Khalil, but the journey itself had already taught him that paths could change, that bonds could form in unexpected ways, and that sometimes the greatest discoveries lay beyond the boundaries of the familiar. As they traveled westward beneath the vast desert sky, the unlikely companions, young camel and wild stallion, continued a journey that had begun in crisis but was evolving into something far more profound. Whatever challenges awaited them in the settlements at the desert's edge, they would face them as they had faced all previous trials. Together, their improbable friendship a testament to possibilities that transcended the ordinary limitations of their world. The desert stretched endlessly before them, its harsh beauty both challenge and promise. The path unfolded one step at a time, leading toward a future neither could have imagined when their lives first intersected beneath the fury of a desert storm.